Okay, so it's a pleasure having you, Marta, presenting your work actually on the Huku dataset, and I'm lucky to have access to this dataset and work with you on the machine learning part. So what we'll be doing today, so you'll present actually from slide number 1 to slide number 23. What the research question is about and what the data set is about, and all the technical issues that we may have with such a survey, in fact. And from slide 24 to slide 38, I think I will tell, well, the little story about how can we use machine learning techniques to tackle some of the issues, and what are the new issues actually raised by using machine learning techniques on this data set. So that's the plan for the next next hour now. So we'll finish at 12 anyway. Don't worry.
All right, I will try to be fast. Plus, this is a work in progress. So yes. Yeah, all comments and suggestions are welcome. I'm very happy to be here with you guys and see your faces. And I'm presenting in the seminar. Thank you, Thierry, for organizing. And yes, so let's see. You like our paper? Okay. I can't share my screen. Can you share the screen, or how does it work? The host disabled participant screen sharing.
I don't see it.
I can't share my screen.
So I did that, I guess. So I'm going to change that. Only host, right? So how can I modify that? I'm not sure I can do it now, but it's on. I cannot change it. Okay, well, I have the presentation anyway, so I can.
Okay.
I have to go back to the settings of this link, in fact.
Eva is also having some technical issues. I guess it's the day.
Okay. Okay, so, all right, so, where is it? It's here, okay. So you should see it now.
Okay. All right, so welcome everyone. So today I'm gonna be presenting together with Thierry Waring a paper that is in process. We are working on it, and it's about the health outcomes for rural to urban migrants, Chinese migrants, and what is the relationship with the Huku system, and how machine learning and algorithms can inform public policy and public policy makers. The outline of the presentation that we are going to follow is the standard one. So first of all, I'm going to introduce the topic and give you a little bit of the literature review, and I'm going to be motivating the question why we should be studying what the rural to urban migrants do, what are their constraints, if their constraints given by policy has any given effect on health outcomes. Then I will present the econometric model. Thierry will take over, right, with the machine learning estimations, and then we will be concluding and taking questions. At any given point, you can stop me. This should be an open-ended conversation, so we can talk about any issues you may have and ask me questions along the way. All right. So let's start with the introduction and literature review. Why this problem is important. As you all know, China has been developing very rapidly, especially since it became part of the WTO in the 70s. And the process of development has spurred large migration flows from rural areas to urban areas, mainly for rural migrants to look for a better life, right? That process has been accelerating over time. So in between 1990s and the end of 2015, the proportion of Chinese population that is now living in urban areas jumped from, it used to be 26% to now 56%. And I will show you that that process, it is not going to come to an end. So it is going to be accelerating, and the projections are saying that actually is growing exponentially. If we go to the data, currently the estimation by the census is telling us that there are more than 240 million people that are rural people, or they were born in rural areas, and now they are living in cities. And apart from that, the Chinese system divides citizens. It divides citizens depending on where they are born or they were born. And that division was introduced in the 1950s, in 1956, and that is called hukou system. So once a person is born in rural area, that person gets assigned like a card, which is like an internal passport that is called hukou card. And that hukou card determines if that person is a rural person or is an urban person, and also determines in which province they are born and if they are local or non-local. That was introduced can you go back? Yeah. So that was introduced in the 50s to try to control migration because it already started, and a way of creating two-tier system in between the elite in the cities and the rest of the population, the people working in rural areas, to agriculture and basically, yeah, agriculture sector to feed the other population. Right? So basically, the hukou has linked access to social services. So if a person is a rural hukou dweller, that person can't access any kind of social services, unemployment benefits, access to public health, schooling, etc., outside of the hukou area. So when those migrants go from the rural areas in which they have assigned land, but that land is not enough to survive or have a better future, and they migrate to the cities looking for a better future, what happens is those migrants carry the hukou. They are not really allowed to migrate, but now they do, and they've been doing that despite of the hukou. But the hukou imposes a constraint, which is that those migrants can't access any given social service in the city of destination. Although that is a huge constraint, what it has created is a system in which the children of those migrant workers are left behind in the rural areas because they can't access schooling in destination, in the urban areas. Also, the migrants, when they get sick or they have any given health issue, they can actually not go to the doctors unless they pay out of pocket, or they go to a special clinics to attend them, or if or basically they are out of the system because the hukou allows them only to access the regulated health services in the city where they, in the urban area, in the rural area where they were born. Okay, despite all of these constraints in access to social services, the migration didn't stop. The graph that you have here, the red bars indicates the refer to all rural migrants without local hukou where they are living. So there are, as you see, is growing, and the blue line indicates in which areas, urban areas, they are working. So despite all these social constraints, people are still migrating from rural areas to urban areas, and they are working. But obviously, as they don't have a hukou, urban hukou, also they can't access better jobs, so well-paid jobs, because that limits them. So the hukou basically introduces huge inequality into the system, and it's a two-tier system. And as you see here on the left, on your left, with the orange bars, this is the forecast. So the forecast indicates that the number of workers from rural areas are going to be migrating and at increasing levels to urban areas despite of the huku restrictions, right? And as you see, the gap is even increasing. So the huku, it is one characteristic that was designed especially enforced after the 70s, but it still is not working to prevent migration. Migrants don't care, they prefer to go and migrate. So our point, it is, okay, what is happening? If they can't access health services, that really influences, yeah, good question. It is possible to get a new huku assignment, Gina. Yeah, so it is possible to get a new huku assignment, but that is really rare. Only 1% of the population of rural to urban migrants get urban huku. When is that possible? It is possible under mainly 3 circumstances. Studying in university or postgraduate studies. Either those rural to urban migrants, they get into the military, or they are working for a state-owned enterprise in management levels and they have connections. So it's really, really difficult for those rural migrants to actually change huku. It happens. Sometimes it happens when there is a reform, and we are going to use those changes to actually apply matching and see what are the differences in health outcomes. So in 2009, China obviously was aware of the situation. Migration wasn't stopping. They are keeping migrating, and they have an issue there in which those migrants can't access healthcare. So they try to reform the healthcare and introduce universal healthcare, but also it was tied to huku. So basically, it didn't reform, or it didn't assess the necessities of the population outside the provision of public healthcare. So if you are a non-local rural huku living in Beijing and you were born in another area, basically you can't go to the doctor unless you go to special clinics that are designed in 2009 to attend the population. They are not very well endowed, or you pay out of pocket, or you rely on networks of people that knows which doctor you can go, which is also something that happens in the US with that's basically our setup, our introduction. You can pass, you can go on too. So despite several cities try to introduce policy reforms and address those health challenges, that hasn't been enough. And since 2006, Beijing is offering primary health care services, but only for the children of migrant workers. So even the children don't have access, obviously, because they were born in rural areas. So they don't have access to schooling, and they don't have access to health services. That's why they are left behind. But that is another phenomenon, and we are not studying that at all. This issue has been under study. There are not many studies that have addressed the link in between migration, limited access to healthcare, and health outcomes in developing economies, and especially in China. One of the issues is the lack of data. And it's difficult to isolate the role of huku in a causal effect, right? The most recent paper is for China is published by Sun in 2015, is her job market paper, but she doesn't have health outcomes that are objective. She does have self-report outcomes coming from survey data. Do I feel well? Do I not feel well? And then you assign numbers. And the recent literature says that obviously is survey data in which you express your feelings and suffers from measurement errors. And also the rural migrants have an incentive to not say the truth there, all right? Because those migrants are run by the establishment. We have a recent paper with Chris Rick published in Eastern Economic Journal about the topic. And so what we discovered is that some migrants are reasonable or healthy at the point of migration, but then they go to cities looking for a better life, but they don't live in very healthy dwellings. And actually they get injured, they delay going to the doctor. It is difficult for them, especially after arrival or within 1 year after arrival, to have networks and to know where to go to get health services. So they go untreated and they go to work even if they are sick. So therefore, those kind of behavior increases risk of workplace accidents, other contagious diseases. There has been an increase in AIDS, and so on and so forth. So this, however, we have a reference of studies that have been carried out in the US on the relationship of health, especially with Mexican immigrants, and what happens with them and the lack of insurance, right? So Goldman et al. In a very nice paper published in 2014 in Demography find a significant and strong correlation between not having an insurance and the decline in health of Mexican immigrants. Obviously here, the HUCU doesn't play an intermediate role. So the problem, so we have another layer of difficulty to isolate this issue when we are talking about China, because the Mexicans come here with their passport or the papers. They are they don't have papers to live in the US, but they are not. They can always go to an emergency room, right, in the US, while that is not the case in China. Okay. And also that brings other levels of health issues when it comes to health insurance coverage, and there are many confounders in between. So we don't really know it is the HUCU, we don't really know it is the health insurance, and what are the mechanisms. For the United States, it seems that the mechanism is the lack of access to insurance, but our aim here in this paper is to try to distinguish do they have worse jobs and they have less income? It is the HUCU, it is not having access to the health insurance. That is not possible to isolate completely doing regression analysis. So that's why we need machine learning to try to predict what is the most important variable playing here. So the research question and motivation. So that's why, as I said, we use machine learning techniques to study a very complex relationship in social science, in the case of health and migration, because we have many confounders here playing a role, which is income, lack to access to better jobs. We have here access to health insurance, or health services, and many other confounders like place of origin, how far is the rural area from the urban area, because if you're getting sick, you are a rural migrant, and then your rural area is not too far away, you can always go back and get treatment back home. So there are many confounders here that may play a role in the relationship in between health outcomes and migration. So first we use as descriptive traditional econometric techniques, and I'm going to show you some regressions and some propensity scores, which is more causal, and then Thierry will describe the machine learning techniques, and we will see the different results. So to summarize, what we really want to do here is use machine learning techniques to question whether HUCU status plays a role in the health outcomes of migrant workers. What is the data that we have? The data here is always an issue when it comes to China, but there is a nice survey reported in the longitudinal survey of rural-urban migration in China that is kept and organized by the University of Australia and by the Institute of the Study of Labor, ISABON. They are trying to collect new waves, but at the moment we only have access to 2 waves, the wave in 2008 and 2009. This is obviously longitudinal. And we have data for a little bit above 71,000 individuals, in which we have the distinction in between urban persons and rural persons. And we have the HUCU. So we know which huku they are in, and if they have changed huku also, and why was the reason to change huku. So we can identify all these questions. As well, this is a very nice survey because it's giving us many socioeconomic indicators and also health outcomes. It's giving us education, how many years have been educated and where, income, ethnicity, data on health indicators as body mass. We can calculate body mass index. We can calculate grip strength. We can calculate if they are hypertense or they are completely fine. If they are underweight, which is an issue in China. Right? Blood pressure. So we have all this data, and we are going to be using that to try to identify the channels in between migrating to urban areas and then health outcomes. And we can even control for the time that has passed since migration. Okay. So our preliminary results, what we get? So far we get that holding an urban huku obviously increases the chance to self-evaluation because we also have data on self-reporting health, how those migrants feel and how the urban people feel. So for self-evaluated health, those migrants that hold an urban huku, they report feeling better compared to the dwellers with rural huku who are living in rural areas. Okay, but although it's very significant only at the 10% level, okay, and there may be problems of mismeasurements, of selection, etc. So we decided to calculate other health outcomes. Those other health outcomes are more objective because in the survey, the people get measured the blood pressure 3 times a day, also their weight every day, grip strength, and other measures. How many times they have gone to the doctor, and other health outcomes. So we are going to use subjective health outcomes compared to objective health outcomes, and we will see what is the difference as well. So we have a nice setup of outcomes here playing a role. So not only how you feel, but okay, you may feel one way, but the indicators are others. So we have also objective indicators. That's one of the novelties of our approach, okay? Obviously, our results indicates that the Chinese government is heading in the right direction of changing the huku system, but they need to establish a huge network of clinics to address the inequalities among the urban population versus the rural to urban migrants. It is not very wise, especially with the latest development and the pandemic, to restrict migrants' access to healthcare. Obviously, this will have an effect in the long run, but this will have an effect on productivity and potential economic growth because most of these rural to urban migrants works in factories. And I'm going to show you our results. Thierry, can you? Okay, so the econometric model, we run basic estimations in which we are using here 3 indicators. The grip strength is an indicator of muscle strength and cardiovascular issues. Blood pressure, which you have, we measure hypertension. Do they have hypertension? Do they not? And then self-reported health. What we see here? Let's focus on the huku. So the variable huku is telling us that it has, this is rural huku. It has, this is, yeah, so it has a negative, but it's not very significant. So this is urban huku, sorry. So the urban huku has a negative, no, let me see. This has to be rural huku. So how I code it? So rural huku. So the rural huku has obviously a negative correlation with health decision because we don't have a very good instrument for huku. But it's not very significant. It is only significant at the 10% level. Obviously, what we see here, it is the migrants that hold a rural huku, they experience, they have, I mean, the likelihood of experiencing hypertension is higher and is highly significant. And the same of having lower grip strength. As you see, we control also for the years in migration, and years in migration seems to have a smoothing effect. So the longer those migrants stay in the cities, they develop probably networks, and then probably they can go to the doctor, although that is not the regular channels to go to the doctor, but they know which doctor could be actually checking on them. And as you see, years in migration actually has a positive effect on all the health variables. Age plays a role, being a male plays a role, obviously being overweight, a smoker, years of schooling, and the income. Income is highly significant and influences health outcomes. The higher the income, the lower is the probability of developing any kind of negative health outcomes. So this is the basic regression analysis. And then we run some causality analysis using matching techniques. Here I'm presenting you the results from the propensity, the PSM model, the propensity score model, which we are estimating the effects of HUKU on self-reported health or for rural to urban migrants. What you see here, it is two groups. We separated migrants in between those who have an urban HUKU and they have achieved to get an urban HUKU, and then the ones that get a rural HUKU. And what we see here, it is that we test that 1 year since migration and 5 years since migration, and we see striking different results. So when we go into the causal analysis, the control group, which is those migrants who get rural HUKU, here the results are a little bit different. They say they feel a little bit better than those that have urban HUKU. Okay, and that the average treatment effect, it is actually highly significant. So this is at odds with what we got in the regression analysis, but this is more robust approach. We control by distance from origin. Here we control by networks effect. We control by what kind of insurance they have, if they have it, because they can also go to collect private insurance. We control for income, how many children these migrants have, other nice co-founders that may be actually running the sequence here. When it comes to this is subjective self-reported health, so that's why we were a little bit reluctant of using this as the appropriate outcome measure. And then we try with other more objective outcomes measure in which we see different results. And they are opposite to the ones that we get with self-reported health. Can you go into the next one? So when we actually measure blood pressure, the treated ones are the ones that actually have rural HUKU and the control is urban. And then you see here that they have a higher blood pressure. Those rural to urban migrants who have been able to change HUKU to an urban one, actually, which is the control, they experience lower levels of systolic blood pressure, okay? As you see, the control group has been diminishing because we don't have many people in the survey that are changing HUKU. As I said, it's difficult, but still it is a nice balance in between treat and control, and we achieve balance here. Okay, and then we have the grip strength, and the same is so the control group here is, which is the urban, they actually have higher grip strength. So the migrants who are living in cities and they were able to change HUKU actually have better health outcomes in terms of lower blood pressure and higher grip strength. However, that is not the case when it comes to self-reported health. So that's why, because we have opposite effects when it comes to regression analysis versus PSM model, we want to go a step further and try to see what the machine learning it is telling us. This is the logic model behind, these are all the variables we have used as controls, and what is the relationship with the outcome. As you see, we are using if they are smoking, what is the body mass index, health insurance, if they are male or female, the age, they are married, the household size, the income. I also run more exercises and more variables, networks, and distance to origin, and the results are very similar. Graphically, what you see here, I'm going to show you for the results for body mass index. As you see, the distribution is completely skewed to the left for the migrants. That so they are actually, many of them are categorized having a BMI below 18, and that means that they are underweight, so they have many nutritional issues, and they are subject, obviously, to higher risks. So these are the results from the econometric section, regular estimation, association, descriptive model versus PSM, which is more causal, in which we have a nice setup of people that are migrants and have changed HUCU, and then we can analyze if the HUCU plays a causal role in health outcomes. It seems that it does. It does when we measure self-reported health, when we measure hypertension, and when also we measure grief strength. But when it comes to self-reported health, it seems that the rural HUCU dwellers living in the cities, they report that they feel better than the urban ones. And we don't really have an explanation for that. So let's see what the machine learning estimations is giving us, if they are giving us more clarity.
Thank you, Marta. Don't raise the expectations too much.
Okay.
So, it's still a work in progress. Yeah. So the issue is really a data issue. I mean, it's as we can see. I mean, what you've done on the econometric side and on the propensity score models, we find different results. So different techniques, same data, different results, and it's like a red flag in a way. Something must happen in the data, and the propensity score models may be a little more appropriate for the data set. So, and it's where I got interested in the data set, because it has an incredible public policy value when you think about it. A government such as the Chinese government, with such a large population, should tackle actually and is tackling this issue the way they want to be. So what's machine learning? So machine learning, it's about, yes. So machine learning, it's about using algorithms. So it's using this, well, not exactly the same, but it's using the same grammar in mathematics, if you want. You put that into algorithms and you benefit from the computing power that we have access to nowadays. So you can actually, and I'm going to do it in a metaphorical way, you can actually bootstrap, it's not bootstrapping per se, but you can leverage, for the lack of a better word, your sample and really get into the variables. So what do we have? So here we have in this data, so potentially omitted variables bias. We may have also the collider bias issue. What machine learning deals with, and I will get into some details a little later actually. So deals with this data, and we actually will separate the data into a trained data set, a test data set, and a validate data set. And when we do that, so already we'll do that in a randomized way, and we will also so which means we can actually correct for the omitted variable bias in some ways by doing that. And also, when we will run actually the different models we will run, we will do it in a cross-validation way. So it's a process by which you actually select subsamples. So you randomize, and then you select subsamples, and you select a number of these subsamples you want, and you can do it with enough computing power. So you run your model on your, and your models, in fact, it's multiple models, on each subsample, and you compare actually all these subsamples. So that's a very robust way to get actually some results from your data. What we also do, which econometrics cannot do, so we calibrate actually our model with the data set we have, and then we can predict on the new data set. So let's say we would get a new data set. I could actually take all the parameters from the first estimations to predict based on the new data from the new data set. So that's a very interesting process. So machine learning to me actually is more of a process than anything else. I mean, it's incredibly powerful because of this process. So we have in the data set, so it's a subsample of the larger data set, because so you have a lot of it was an unbalanced survey, so you have a lot of missing observations and so on. So I had to shrink it to be able to make the algorithms work. So those are actually the data and that we are using in these machine learning estimations. So it's again, I mean, Marta explained why it's an interesting data set. So you have objective measures, you have subjective measures, you have socioeconomic indicators, but you have also personal data, so such as body weight and so on. So a very interesting data set, and which may explain actually why it's also with all these dimensions. I mean, why it's also complicated with more traditional econometric techniques to really get into the results. So again, what is the process? So the process is to randomize. So you take your data set and you create a train data set out of the original one. And you do it in a randomization way. So when you do that, obviously, you correct somehow for some of the omitted variables bias. The split was 70-30. So I created a 70% data set based on the train data set and 30% on the test data set. Also, I did some imputation of missing values. We use KNN approximations to do that. Some what we call hot encoding for dummy variables, and also some standardization for the feature variables to be able to compare. The best, so after running some of the models, and I'm going to get into that, the best was to have a 5-fold cross-validation for each model. So what does that mean? So once you have your trained data set, which is 70% of your original data set in a randomized way, what you do, so so 5-fold cross-validation would mean that you subset in a random way, actually, again, your trained data set, and you compare actually the models, the results, and the models actually on these subsets. So we use a regression model, we use support vector machines, a random forest with bagging and boosting, in fact, to see how the accuracy, we talk about accuracy when we talk about machine learning, how the accuracy improves. But there is also something interesting, which is the ensemble approach. So the ensemble approach will actually combine all the models together and take the better accuracy measures, the better accuracy performance. So that's what we do here, and I'm looking at time. So the target variable here in this data set is about the days missed for sickness. And can we actually explain with all these subjective and objective measures, can we explain the days missed for sickness? So we use days missed for sickness as a proxy. The feature variables are CT, HUKU, the reason for HUKU change, health rating, having a commercial insurance, public insurance, years of education, years since migration. And so a first model was a decision tree, so the conditional inference tree here. And it's interesting because what we observe, so as a first step, is that health rating by the migrants actually plays a role, and it comes first. So you see causality on this tree here. So it comes first, and then depending on the score in terms of health rating, it's about having a commercial insurance or not. So again, we look at the performance, so using different measures and different models. So health rating and commercial insurance was validated by another model. So that's a decision tree. But then we used actually random forest approaches. And so if you look at the top 5 here, I mean, they look similar. We did some, so 2 different treatments here. But it's about health rating, age, BMI, monthly income, systolic average, and the right grip. So that's the key, in fact, variables if you were to understand actually what are the key independent variables in an econometric approach. So we did the different models. So we look at the accuracy and the standard deviation of the accuracy, if you want, here. So I don't want to spend too much time, I mean, on these different models, but boosting random forest, support vector machine, and X gradient boosting tree. So the accuracy is pretty high when we ensemble, and it goes up actually when we ensemble all these models together. So that's what we can do with the computing power. I mean, you put all the models all together, and you get to, you correct actually for a lot of the inefficiencies of some of the modeling techniques, and we get a very high explanatory power. So with these variables, again, actually, the health reported by the migrants, and so BMI and so on. So that's where we are actually right now, using, so it's a lot of lines of code, I have to say, actually, to dig into this data. What's interesting to me actually, and what I think it is important, so it's having algorithms in place, being able to categorize actually the causal relationships for here our proxy using the machine learning technique, which was the days for missed for sickness. It highlights actually what are the primary variables to look into if I were a government. So it has some interesting implications for public policies. And what I find interesting as well, since it is based on algorithms, I mean, and since it is offering some predictive power, I mean, again, the process is important. I mean, you train your data set, you test your data set, you validate, and then you can get some parameters to calibrate actually for predictions. So once you get your new data entering into your governmental agency, for instance, then you can actually predict what would be and who would be actually concerned with these parameters, and what would be the impact in terms of days missed for sickness. So that's interesting in the context of China in particular, and as we put here, actually, the Chinese Hukou system is a move in the right direction, but we need to make sure actually that it does work. So as I said, I mean, to us, I mean, machine learning is becoming so interesting. I mean, the process in itself is an interesting process because it can tackle some of the issues we have in econometrics, but it's also so interesting for public policing because it has some predictive modeling power. So thank you. And questions. So we have 7 minutes for a question.
Thank you, everyone.
So I've got a
So how can I stop sharing? I lost actually, it's where is it on my screen? Okay, I have 3 screens, so it's all over the place, but I guess it works.
So is it okay if I jump in?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Okay, no, I think, sorry, I'm coming in late. I was in the middle of teaching a class. I had to get in here to hear this paper because I think this is the one on healthcare outcomes and migrant workers in cities. Is that right?
Yes.
And so we see this kind of adverse effects from these health workers these migrant workers because maybe they're away from their networks and well, I thought it was really interesting because you know, throughout China there was a lot of this kind of migration, you know, and you see this a lot in these bigger cities, and so I think it's a super relevant type of question that was you know, being posed here, and then one thing I just wanted to say too is I started to see, and I've since become kind of, the last year I've become more out of touch with what's going on in China, but I did see that at least in Beijing, there was a push. They actually were forcibly sort of pushing migrants, pushing a lot of these people out of the cities.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. Mm-hmm.
And so they got sort of displaced again.
Mm-hmm.
And so in terms of just following up with those outcomes, I'd be kind of curious to think about, I don't know if there's an interest for a follow-up, but you know, if what's happening to them now. And
yeah, that is an interesting remark, Matthew. Actually, yes, they are being out again, and so the idea now is to reroute the migrants to second-tier cities instead of Shanghai, Beijing, and the larger cities, because many of those cities are not really populated and they need workers. So it is the effort of the elite or the party, the Communist Party, to actually try to direct migrations in the sense that to fulfill the economic power. So now they need the second tiers to flourish. So they are kicking out migrants from the big crowded cities to the second tier cities. Offering them hukus, actually. One of the ways of doing that is, okay, I'm going to change your huku to the huku of the city you are going to, and then you're going to have access to those social services. And that is going to help your family because your children can go to school, you can go to clinics without spending money out of pocket, although you know that the health system in China, the public one, is certainly not the best one, right? What is interesting from the machine learning outcome, in which we use another outcome, which is days missed for sickness, and we don't use that one in the econometrics, it is that actually having a commercial insurance plays a huge role. That is what is, so it's not the huku per se, but other actually the other mechanism. There the mechanism is, do you have a private insurance or not? And that determines if you are going to go to work more, you are going to miss work related to health issues more often. So, which gives you an indication of what kind of insurance works better, because we have data on all kinds of insurance.
That's interesting.
So for me, that is.
And you're not concerned about selection effects in that setting, where some people might be getting that kind of insurance specifically because they're in an industry that they might be more likely to be harmed or more likely to be missing work.
So with the survey data, we always have self-selection effects also in between who is getting a urban huku versus who is getting a migrant huku. How can we actually, there is also, how can we actually smooth the self-selection effect? Completely it's not possible because that is but we can control. We can control for the industry in which they are, we can control for the income, we can control for education, which are good predictors of the industry in which they work. But the problem of self-selection in survey data, because we are trying to replicate basically a randomized controlled trial with observational data. So when you want to infer causality there, you always have the self-selection problem. How you mitigate that, it is by adding controls. You also, by adding many controls, you lose power. So there is a trade-off there, which is complex. So I don't see the causality comes more from the machine learning, the PSM model, or any kind of coercion effect. I do call it evidence from matching. I don't call it causality because we don't have an experiment here.
Mm.
But certainly, I mean, there are nice lessons to learn from the different exercises. Having caveats, yeah. And one is that, the self-selection. We try to mitigate it, but getting rid of that completely, well, we can be worried about the unknowns, right? So the co-founders that are unknown. We run many tests. We run the Rosenberg test and many other tests to see if there is any kind of co-founder that is running our results. And I mean, we pass those tests, but there could be unknowns there. Yeah, that why you go into I don't know, producing chips and managerial in an industry that has high demand versus going into food chains. Yeah. So, but we control for income, education, etc. This is the best we can do with the data that we have. Good, very good question.
A question about the data, Marta. Can you track these individuals over time? Is that?
No, it's longitudinal. We can't. We have 2 waves, but they don't follow the individuals.
I'm sorry to ask that, but.
We wish. We don't have a panel.
Yeah, because
It's the same with the census in the US. You don't have a panel.
Yeah, no, I'll only dream about those.
No, there is no way you can follow people, basically. Imagine following people in China for we have some data. For example, now I'm working on entrepreneurship, and also I don't have panel data for entrepreneurship. I have census data and longitudinal. I mean, it's very difficult to follow people over time.